You're listening to Reporters and Reported, a podcast from Cardiff University School of Journalism, Media and Culture. In each episode, brought to you by the MA Journalism students of 23-24, we'll bring you insights and interviews with key people in the industry.
We'll examine the challenges, opportunities and threats facing journalism and get tips about the best way to follow a career in the media. This week it's me, Brianna Francis and George Scotland, and today we welcome the Director of News and Current Affairs at ITV News, Michael Jermey. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Can you tell us about your role and what a typical day looks like for yourself?
Yeah, so my role is giving a sense of direction to ITV News and Current Affairs. We have a very broad range of programmes people will be very familiar with on ITV1, like News at 10, our hour-long evening news, programmes that people in each region and nation are very familiar with, our 18 separate services across the country. And then the strong current affairs brands that ITV has, from the Tonight programme to Exposure, investigative current affairs, to the Peston political programme. And obviously not just television, but services in digital that target specific audiences, younger audiences on TikTok, for instance, or subjects that are slightly more specialist than you might get in a broadcast that only lasts half an hour on television.
Brilliant, thank you.
And as TV news viewing figures continue to decline, what is your response to people who may say that the medium is dying?
Yeah, there has been a bit of a drop-off in television viewing figures, but I would point out that the most watched programmes in the UK every night of the week include, if you take the top 10 or 15 programmes, include 3 or 4 news programmes. And television news, whilst there's a bit of a drop-off in live viewing, has seen less of a drop-off in over 10 years than most other genres on television. And of course, a lot of the people who perhaps don't choose to watch a programme live anymore still see ITV News or BBC News content online. So I still think there's a great appetite for news, and television is still the medium that more people get their news from than any other.
What makes television special compared to other mediums?
Yeah, television allows you to see what's happening, to almost be there. And the strength of pictures, I think, still matters as much as ever. Now, you don't have to watch television now to see those pictures. You can see them on a website or an app, or you can see them on TikTok. But the power of the televisual image that first became available to people in the 1950s and became a stronger and stronger element of news over the 40 years after that, is still at the heart of what so many people around the world want as part of their news consumption.
So how important is language, and how important is it for news organisations to correct and clarify language they've used?
I think language is enormously important. Language is what we use to try to accurately describe situations. So the choice of words in reporting matters. And I think if you make mistakes, the sensible thing is to put your hands up and explain to the audience what you did wrong and why, and to move on. And I think it's important that we choose our words properly, that we investigate things properly, and we try our very, very best to describe what we find and to investigate the stories that we pursue accurately and on behalf of the viewers. And the more transparent we can be with our viewers, the better.
Brilliant. And what skills can we, as journalism students, equip ourselves with to meet the challenges facing the news industry?
Yeah, I think some of the things that young people coming into journalism can do are the same things that people have always done. So to be inquisitive, to ask questions, to want to deal in facts, to be fair to the people that you're reporting on, to want to tell a whole rounded story rather than to be partial and just go one part of it. And then there are a whole set of things which are new to the context in which we're working. So to understand that stories are told on different platforms in slightly different ways, to be able to appeal to the audience wherever they are. And I think a course like the one you're doing at Cardiff equips young journalists very well for those first steps into broadcast journalism or into traditional newspaper journalism or into to digital journalism.
And sort of following on from that, throughout your career, how have you had to adapt to different changes in technology and attitudes towards the media?
Yeah, I think journalism is always changing, and you have to change with it. And it's one of the things that makes it enormously attractive. You know, when I started as a very young journalist in the 1980s, the technology was utterly different from now. But each development in technology has helped us tell stories better. And some of those universal elements of journalism, you know, are still there. The need to be inquisitive, and from an audience's point of view, the desire to be informed fairly accurately and to be taken to places where they can see what's going on in their own home, that they would, you know, never get to go to or to hear about without the assistance of a journalist, if you like, in a sense, acting on behalf of the audience.
Yeah.
Perfect. And do you think we are seeing a shift in people being more interested in local and personal news? And how does the new medium ITVX fit into this?
I think people have always been interested in local news that directly affects them. I think in some senses there's less of a provision of truly local news than there was in the past because of the challenges that the local newspaper sector has been facing. ITV News does international news, national news, and I think a really good regional service right across the UK. We've done that on television for a long time. We've done it in varying forms and digital for a considerable length of time. And we're now launching on our ITVX service a regional video on demand news service. So everybody in the UK can not only on ITVX see the latest national and international news, but will from the beginning of December be able to see their local news. Both the latest television programme that's gone out, highlights of some of the most interesting items from the week, and also some local exclusive content that will just be available on ITVX.
So will that be like a rolling news channel?
It's not, I think that's the wrong way to think of it. And we've got used to the idea in television of either the evening bulletins on the big entertainment channels or a 24-hour rolling news channel. What this is slightly different. We're offering all the main stories of the day, and you can select which one you want to hear about, and you see it in the form of television, but you in a sense create your own running order. It's a video on demand product with the ability to go live on really big stories on ITVX. But what you don't have to do is sit through the long sections of a news channel you might be less interested in. So you've got the choice of news channels where you can watch a 24-hour rolling service, or somewhere where you have always up-to-date news, but you can choose the stories you want to watch.
So I would say if we were to go back like 10 years or definitely further ago, people only really had access to mainstream news outlets. I'd say in this day and age, that's definitely not the case. People have access to loads of different platforms. What would you say the mainstream news outlets offer to their audience, which is different to those sort of newer, less mainstream news outlets?
I think more outlets is great. I think to have choice and to better hear about different things is really desirable, and I think in some senses we have more choice than ever before. But I do think it matters that news outlets respect facts, are on the side of their audience, want to tell their audience the truth rather than be a form of propaganda. Mm-hmm. And I think some outlets on social media don't actually meet those standards. And I hope that we, at least, act on behalf of our audience, are accurate, do our very best to give people true facts, create a space in which debate can happen around issues, fair debate between people with different perspectives, show due impartiality in all our coverage, and fund independent journalism to a very great extent. We, as a reasonably big media organisation, have enough funding to go and do independent journalism from Ukraine, independent journalism from Israel, Gaza, and that resource that we're able to bring to it can enhance and does enhance our journalism. So I hope that an organisation like ITV News its independence, its good funding, its absolute intent to act on behalf of its audience, all bring advantages for viewers that not all media outlets have.
Where do you see the direction of mainstream media in relation to the culture wars that we've seen over the past several years?
Yeah, I find the culture wars enormously unattractive. I wish they'd never started. I don't want to be part of them. I hope that ITV News can create a space where debate can happen, respectful debate that may have very different views being expressed, but where the whole of society can either contribute or watch that debate. I think the culture wars has led to too many echo chambers where people only talk to people they agree with. I think the culture wars has led to a distortion of an awful lot of facts. I don't want, as a broadcaster, I don't really want us to be part of it at all. I regret that they started, I regret that they continue, and I think we serve a useful function, almost as an antidote to the culture wars, where people can have disagreements about big, important issues, where things can be debated, but on a basis of a commonly shared set of facts and civilised debate, which I think is the only way societies move forward.
And Michael, you've been in the industry a long time, haven't you, since the 1980s? Why have you stayed in your current role so long, and how have you adapted and been resilient over the years?
Yeah, I love television news. I love what we do. I think what we do is important and matters. It's an energising environment to work in. It's changed enormously. I think you have to change with it, and I think you have to sort of enthusiastically adopt new technologies. You have to be interested in new themes, new stories that come along. But it's a great industry to work in. I absolutely don't believe in a golden age of television news somewhere in the past. I think it's always moving forward. I think new people coming into the industry can always develop it. And that's a fantastically exciting environment to work in. I enjoy it as much today as I did my first day in television news. And I think a new generation coming into the industry will continue to shape it, continue to develop it. And I think television news and digital news will continue to play an absolutely vital part in British society for decades to come.
And how would you say life looks if you're a journalist in ITV, and how is that different if you're a journalist in another organisation?
Yeah, I hope that people who work in ITV News work in a nice collaborative environment where people with every level of experience can make a contribution, where inquisitive, hard-working journalists can do interesting journalism that makes a difference and that our viewers value. But I think ITV News is an attractive place for lots of people coming out of courses like the one that you're on to work. And we certainly benefit as an organisation from people at the beginnings of their career coming and adding ideas and adding enthusiasm and adding energy to our teams.
Perfect. And obviously we had the Philip Schofield saga earlier this year. What are the challenges for news organisations reporting on themselves?
I think any responsible news organisation should treat stories about itself or about its parent company in the same way as it would report on any other news story. And obviously that brings some challenges. And it's good that the viewers have lots of choices of places where they can listen to that story from. But impartial, robustly independent journalism requires you to treat every story on its merits and treat every institution in the same way. And if there is a controversy about a big broadcaster like us, I always say to our news teams, treat the story as you would if it was happening in any other institution. Stick to the facts, deal with it with due impartiality. Don't show fear or favour. And there is nothing more important than that robust independence of a news organisation, and we will preserve that at all costs.
How have the opportunities changed for young journalists coming into the field?
I think in lots of ways this is an absolutely terrific time for a young journalist to come into the field. once upon a time, there were a number of big organisations, and people got into them through applications a bit like now. But one of the really attractive things about what's happened over the last few years is the ability of anybody to broadcast, if you like, to create a podcast, for instance, without having to go through a big gatekeeper. So young journalists can get on with doing the journalism whilst perhaps they look for their ideal job in a bigger organisation, a bigger company. And the fact that people are enabled to do that, it sort of democratises news reporting and news creation. I think it's as exciting a time to come into journalism as any I can remember. And I think, as I say, people sometimes talk about golden ages in the past. There are downsides to the way the world works now. We've talked a little bit about the culture wars and so forth, but there are also enormous upsides. And I think it's possible to see now as a golden age for young journalists, and the things that you can do and the tools that enable you to do journalism from the get-go of your careers.
Michael Jermey, thanks so much for joining us.